This is an introduction to basic wood turning. It is a hobby and craft that you can really enjoy and get into. So here we have a very popular size of lathe with 500 millimeters between centers and a 12-inch or 305 millimeter swing. It is now facing you, so you're seeing the business end, and this would normally be the side that I would stand at if I'm turning. But we want to show you a couple of features about this. First of all, we have a tool rest here which you can index for height and angle, and it fits onto your banjo, which one can slide into appropriate position when you've mounted up your piece of wood that you wish to turn. Now here's a little trick. All of these securing levers are indexable, so we can pull it out and actually get that out of the way. This is the headstock with your drive, and this is your tailstock, which you will engage to secure your piece of wood, and once it's firmly mounted you can then go ahead with turning. Also, this is a variable speed lathe. It has a digital readout in the window, and you have a rheostat switch here. There are 3 basic speeds, and the lower speed would be engaged on the belt for turning something with a large diameter like a bowl. But if you're turning something delicate like a pen, you could leave that in the high range and you'd have sufficient power just selecting through the rheostat. Now of course you can remove your faceplate or a drive spur and fit a chuck. Then we're really getting to where the big boys play. This is the nicest way to mount a bowl or a pepper grinder. So those jaws always self-center. You can grip round stock or square stock between the gaps in the jaws. We'll show you how big this can open. How's that for size? You can see it's dovetailed to hold things securely. There are different sizes of lathes, and you need to work out what your interest is to be able to make a decision and a wise choice. So this is an average size of lathe and would be fine for turning pens, medium to small pepper mills and bowls. You could turn a bowl of up to 12 inches or 305 millimeters of diameter. Remember that your blank is probably going to be a bit bigger than that. So if you have a square, you can only do a 230 mil bowl in here and trim off the 4 corners to get it down to size. Otherwise those corners are going to be hitting your bed. You must remember that if you're going to be turning pepper mills, you will have a Jacob's chuck on here and your 25 millimeter spade bit to bore your body. So you need over double the length of the final size of your pepper mill between centers. So if you want to turn 235 millimeter pepper mills, you'll need a longer lathe that has up to 800 millimeters between centers. Also, if you want to turn legs for tables, your average dining table stands 72 centimeters high. That's 720. So you want about 850 between centers to allow for your drive spur and your live center. So you need to work out what you are going to eventually move to when it comes to turning, or buy a lathe that has an optional extension bed, which is also a good option. So we have our imaginary piece of wood between centers, and we want to show the basic tools you will need. So I would start with a roughing gouge to take a piece of square stock to a cylinder. It has a bevel grind on the reverse, and that is probably the first tool that you're going to use when turning. The next tool is a diamond-shaped parting tool, and one uses that in 2 ways. One is to turn sections to be able to create detail within certain parameters. One can also use it sideways for creating a groove for decorative effect. The third way one can use it is once you have finished making a spindle and you need to part it off, you can then come in, and as you go towards the middle, you take the tool through an arc, and then you can catch the piece. After the third tool that you will need is a spindle gouge. It's probably the tool that you're going to do the most detail with. You can turn details and you can curl in as you come deeper. So if we were turning a bead, one would roll it or close that fluted section towards your pommel. It's also the only tool you need for turning pens. It's just a 1/2 inch spindle gouge. To use a spindle gouge effectively and safely, the handle should be lower than the tool tip so that you're coming up and doing a slicing cut into the wood piece. If you start lifting your right hand, then the cut gets more aggressive and it may start to get noisy. That is the warning that you're going to get a catch. It becomes a knee-jerk reaction eventually to drop your right hand. To find the sweet spot with turning with a gouge, which is a chisel type tool, can be a bit tricky. So for beginners, quite often one can use a tungsten tip tool. It's a lot easier to use. What you will do is to set the tool rest higher and have the handle higher than the tool, so you're doing a downward motion and you're basically scraping the wood. And then you can take a cut to the left or a cut to the right. The beauty of this is that it's also good for turning acrylic and resin work, whereas if you're going to use a spindle gouge, you may get a bird's nest. You will learn all about a bird's nest when it wraps around your work, and then you have to stop and clear it off. While speaking of scrapers, it's also nice to have a 1 inch or 25mm scraper. There we go. This one's homemade. It was made from an old file. Turning does not have to be an expensive hobby. With this, always make sure that the handle is higher than the working tip, and this can be used after detailing your piece of wood to the basic shape that you want, to get off any splinters and to get it really smooth just prior to sanding. The fifth tool that I want to show you is a bowl gouge. And if you're interested in turning a bowl, those other tools I've shown you are too light duty, and you'll probably snap it off just in front of the handle. This has a round shaft that remains that diameter all the way into the handle for quite a good distance, and it has the strength to deal with end grain wood turning. This can be used to shape and round off the outside of your blank for a bowl. It can also be used for hollowing, in which case you would come in and do hollowing cuts like that, and it has sufficient length to do deep hollowing either on a bowl or on a vase. It's lots of fun. We hope that you have found this intro helpful. It certainly is a very creative and enjoyable hobby to do. You may even find that it grows into an occupation for you. Remember that you want to work safely. There are clubs and associations that you can contact locally. You can take 1 or 2 lessons which they offer free of charge to make sure that you are working safely and that you are able to enjoy wood turning. It is something that can earn profit too. For myself, I've made up projects to sell to fund various accessories and new tools to increase my scope of wood turning.